Alzheimer's disease. We hear that term and we think of this huge, scary medical mystery. And it is. But what if a major clue to solving it isn't hidden away in a high-tech lab, but is actually something much closer to home? Like, what's on your dinner plate? That's the powerful idea we're going to dig into.
So, let's just start with the scale of this. Right now, there are over 50 million people around the world living with Alzheimer's. And that number is climbing so fast that researchers say it just can't be our genes. Something else has to be going on. Something in our modern lives is driving this epidemic.
And make no mistake, the stakes are incredibly high. Dr. Richard Johnson, a key researcher in this field, said something that really stops you in your tracks. He said, people probably would prefer to get cancer to dementia. And when you think about it, it makes a devastating kind of sense. It's a disease where you don't just lose your health, you lose yourself. So finding an answer is beyond urgent.
To understand where we are now, you have to understand where we've been. For decades, the story of Alzheimer's research has been a bit like a detective novel, where almost everyone was chasing the same lead. But as it turns out, they might have been chasing the wrong clue all along.
And that lead, the #1 suspect for years, was something called amyloid plaques. These are basically these sticky clumps of protein that build up in the brain. For a long time, the thinking was pretty simple. See the plaque? Blame the plaque. It's kind of like how we think about cholesterol clogging up arteries and heart disease. It seemed like the obvious culprit.
And I mean, the scientific world went all in on this idea. We're talking about a 30-year manhunt, billions of dollars spent. Over 25 major drugs were developed, all designed to attack these plaques. And the result? It was a total dead end. The drugs just didn't work. So researchers had to step back and ask a really hard question. What if the plaques aren't the cause? What if they're just a symptom of something else? That question changed everything.
So, with the plaque theory on shaky ground, scientists went back to the drawing board. They started looking at what happens in the brain in the earliest stages of the disease. And they found 3 new clues that kept popping up. First, neuroinflammation. Basically, the brain's immune system is on high alert all the time. Second, brain insulin resistance. The brain cells are struggling to use their main fuel, glucose. And third, mitochondrial dysfunction. The tiny power plants inside the brain cells are failing. So the big mystery became, what could possibly cause all 3 of these things at once?
Well, this is where our detective story takes a fascinating turn. A new, groundbreaking theory emerged that seemed to connect all the dots. It's called the fructose hypothesis, and it points the finger at a completely new suspect, one that has been hiding in plain sight for a very long time. And here is where it gets really compelling. Just look at how the known effects of fructose line up with those 3 clues from the early Alzheimer's brain. Does fructose cause low-grade inflammation? Yes. Does it lead to insulin resistance? Absolutely. Does it damage mitochondria and sap energy? You bet it does. It's a perfect match. The criminal's profile fits the crime scene.
Okay, but a good detective knows a profile isn't enough. You need evidence. You have to place your suspect at the scene of the crime. So, if fructose really is the culprit, then you'd expect to find it in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. The question is, was it there?
And yep, this was the smoking gun. Autopsy studies found that fructose levels were 5 to 6 times higher in the key areas of the brain affected by Alzheimer's. The suspect wasn't just at the scene, it had practically moved in and made itself at home.
But wait, because here's the plot twist. You might be thinking, okay, I'll just avoid high fructose corn syrup. But it's not that simple. It turns out our own brains can make fructose. When we eat a lot of sugar or high glycemic carbs, we're talking bread, rice, potatoes, our brains can take that flood of glucose and convert it directly into fructose. We literally have a fructose factory inside our own heads. So let's just process that for a second. Our brains can make this stuff. What in the world does that actually mean for us, for our daily choices? Let's take this fascinating science and figure out what it means for what's on your plate tonight.
This changes things, right? It means the list of foods that can trigger this process is much longer than you'd think. It's not just about soda. It's the staples of a modern diet. Bread, rice, potatoes, cereal, chips, pancakes, even stuff we're told is healthy, like those low-fat sweetened yogurts. All of these foods can give that fructose factory in your brain the raw material it needs to get to work.
And what happens next is a really vicious cycle. You eat these carbs, your brain makes fructose, and that fructose basically tells your brain cells to go into low power mode. Well, when your brain feels like it's low on energy, what does it do? It sends out powerful cravings for more quick energy, which means more sugar and carbs. And so the cycle repeats, getting worse and worse over time.
If you look at a typical modern diet, it becomes pretty obvious how we got here. For many people, grains, starchy vegetables, and added sugars make up well over half of their daily calories. We are constantly feeding that internal fructose factory, keeping it running day in and day out.
So the key takeaway from all this research is actually incredibly clear and I think very empowering. This isn't about blaming a single food. It's about understanding a biological process. And it means that one of the most powerful, evidence-based things you can do is to simply lower your intake of sugar and high glycemic carbs to help protect your brain.
For decades, we've been searching for a complex, silver bullet solution to Alzheimer's that would come from a lab. But this research forces us to ask a much simpler and maybe more profound question. A question that puts the power back into our hands. Is the key to saving your brain already on your plate?